All right, we're jumping right into a really big question. When did Shi'ism actually begin? For this, we're going to push aside the modern noise and dig directly into the foundational sources to see what story they tell about the roots of this belief. Okay, so you've probably heard this before, right? The common idea is that Shi'ism was a political thing that started after the Prophet Muhammad 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had passed away. But the sources we're looking at today pose a fascinating question. What if that's not the full story? What if the seeds of Shi'ism were actually planted by the Prophet himself? So to really get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the basics. We need to understand the word at the very heart of it all. Shia. What does it actually mean? It sounds simple, but trust me, the answer here is the key to unlocking everything else. Well, in plain Arabic, Shia is a pretty straightforward word. It just means followers or partisans or a group of supporters. It wasn't originally some special religious title. You can even find the Quran using it in this very general way to talk about the followers of earlier prophets. Okay, now here is where the plot thickens. The word starts out as this very broad, general term. The Quran talks about the Shia of Moses, alayhi salam, and you can even find history books mentioning the Shia of Muawiyah. But then something happens. Over time, that broad meaning starts to narrow, focusing in like a laser beam, until it becomes completely identified with one specific group, the Shia of Ali, alayhi salam. And this brings us to the absolute core of the argument presented in these sources. They claim this shift wasn't an accident. It didn't just happen randomly. They argue it was a deliberate act, established by none other than the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. I mean, just listen to this statement. It's an incredible thing to say, and it's found in both Sunni and Shia collections. The Prophet ﷺ is looking at his cousin Ali, alayhi salam. But notice, he doesn't just praise the man himself. He very specifically includes his Shia, his followers, in a promise of ultimate victory. And look, this wasn't just some one-off comment. The sources point to this as a clear pattern. The praise isn't just for Imam Ali alayhi salam personally, it's for his followers as a distinct group. The Prophet ﷺ is essentially drawing a line in the sand, saying on this side are Ali and his Shia, and on the other, his enemies. And this wasn't just some abstract idea about a group that might exist one day in the future. The sources are pretty clear on this. They point to figures like Abu Hatim al-Razi, who recorded that some of the Prophet's closest, most well-known companions, people like Salman, Abu Dar, Miqdad, and Ammar, were already being called the Shia of Ali, while the Prophet ﷺ was still alive. So we've seen the sayings attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, but the argument presented in these sources goes even deeper. It connects this entire idea of a specially designated group directly to the Quran itself. So you have this verse here, where God speaks about a group of believers and calls them the best of creatures. I mean, what an incredible honor, right? So naturally, the people around the Prophet ﷺ wanted to know, who is this verse actually talking about? And the answer, as recorded by well-known commentators like al-Suyuti, is just wow. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have turned to Imam Ali alayhi salam and told him that this verse, this high praise from God, was about him and his Shia. Just think about that for a second. That's a divine praise from the Quran being directly applied by the Prophet to a specific named group. All right, so we've heard the words. Now let's look at the actions. The sources highlight these key moments in the Prophet's life that seem to back all of this up, where he consistently puts Ali alayhi salam in a very special, unique position. When you lay it out like this, you can really see the pattern the sources are talking about. From the very beginning of his public mission at al-Dar, through the Pact of Brotherhood in Medina, and at these absolutely critical moments, like the Tabuk Expedition, he keeps elevating Imam Ali alayhi salam. And that comparison to Aaron and Moses alayhim salam, that's a huge deal. In that story, Aaron was Moses' right-hand man, his deputy. The implication there is pretty hard to miss. Now, obviously, these are major claims. And as you'd expect, not everyone reads these traditions the same way. There's a whole other side to this historical debate. And to get the full picture, we absolutely have to look at how others interpret these exact same events and sayings.
So, for instance, you take a very prominent Sunni scholar like Ibn Hajar. He offers a different perspective. He suggests that when the Prophet ﷺ used the word Shia, he didn't mean a specific theological sect. He just meant it in a general way, like the lovers of Ali or his partisans. It's essentially an argument to separate that original term from what he considered to be later developments.
But then you get the response from Shia scholars like 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗢𝗂𝗏, and they're basically saying, hold on a second, that doesn't quite add up. Their question is, if the Shia of Ali just meant, well, everyone who loves him, then why single them out with a special name and a special promise, right? It kind of defeats the whole purpose of making a distinction in the first place. So let's pull all these threads together. We've looked at the meaning of the word itself, the Prophet's own statements, the connections to the Quran, and the different ways scholars have wrestled with all this. So where does that leave us? What's the final conclusion being presented here?
The final thesis put forward by these sources is that Shi'ism wasn't a reaction. It wasn't some political party that popped up later. It wasn't a breakaway movement. The claim is that it's an original current within Islam, planted, nurtured, and named by the Prophet of Islam, ﷺ, from the very beginning.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. If you accept the evidence laid out in these sources, that the Prophet, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 himself, established the Shia of Ali, then it completely reframes how we look at all of early Islamic history. It suggests that the divisions that came later weren't brand new inventions, but were maybe rooted in distinctions made by the founder of the faith, right from the very start.